And it focused on trying to remedy the fragmented, siloed approach that we have, not only in our courts, but in dealing with people that are cycling through our courts. The court system itself is fragmented. The response is fragmented. People are kind of pushed back and forth among programs and systems, and there's not enough kind of participant-based focus. And so basically my initial foray into this was to try to get people to understand that we're all seeing the same people. That it's hospitals, police, courts, jails. We're seeing some of the same people. So why don't we work together to figure out how we solve their problems and how we actually make a difference for them, rather than living in our own little world. And as people pass through, we check the box that, well, they came through and we close that case.
Well, I want to thank you first for coming and sitting down with me so I can do an interview with you. And I usually have people just introduce themselves and tell us where you're at.
Well, I'm Dave Larson. I'm a judge in Federal Way, Washington, and been a judge for 16 years. I'm currently running for the state Supreme Court, position 2. It's an open seat this year. So I just appreciate the opportunity to meet with you and have a good discussion.
Thank you so much, Dave. We became friends on social media, and then we collided. We collided last January. So, so did your career as a judge start as a judge, or did you have a law career prior to that?
Well, I was so just so it's clear, I worked full time and went to law school at night.
Okay.
And I did that very purposely. I worked for the first year in the misdemeanor division of the Pierce County Prosecutor's Office. In my second year, I was in the civil division. And so my first year, I was kind of like a clerk. I handled subpoenas and witnesses and that type of thing. My second year, I was in the civil division, where I helped write legal briefs and motions on civil rights cases, on police cases, those type of things where the county would be sued. And then my third year, I went to a private firm. But the reason I did it very intentionally is because I wanted to be a trial lawyer. And I hit the ground running. I became staff trial counsel for Safeco Insurance Company.
Okay.
Because the firm I had worked for my third year of law school did work for them. They were impressed with my work, so they hired me as in-house counsel. And I tried my first case a month after I was a lawyer.
Oh, wow. And how did that case go?
I won, of course.
Oh, that's awesome. And so how long did you work for Safeco, work in the insurance field?
Just about 3 or 4 years for Safeco, and then I went to a private firm that did that type of work, and then I had my own firm for 10 years before I went on with a large firm in Seattle, Williams Kastner, as of counsel, where I did high-level litigation involving, so to take a deposition, you needed 25 chairs in a conference room. It was construction litigation, aerospace litigation. I was national counsel on 15,000 asbestos lawsuits, where I managed all the discovery for a client out of Cleveland that ended up buying companies that had asbestos products. So they ended up buying those liabilities. And so we helped manage all that litigation, called mass torts is what it was. So that's what I did as a lawyer.
And then you became a judge?
Well, I was president of the Federal Way School Board at the time.
Okay.
And
in your spare time?
Yeah, there you go. And my court, the court in my community, the Federal Way Municipal Court, was in trouble. A judge had resigned. Another judge was creating some issues. And so the city manager and I discussed me coming over and helping to fix the court. So I've been there now 16 years ever since. And so it was pretty...
Was that an appointed position?
It was originally appointed.
Okay.
And then I had to run. So I was appointed in March of 2008.
Okay.
And then I had to run in 2009 and won the election because I had an opponent. First time you run, you usually get an opponent. And then I've been elected unopposed there 4 or 5 times now. 4 times.
So do you think it was your reputation in the community that helped you be appointed or that helped you be elected that first time?
I think because I had a reputation of kind of being a mechanic is what somebody's called it, where I fix things.
Yeah.
I think that's why I was asked to come in and kind of be that person that stabilized the court. And it took a year and a half, and ultimately the other judge that was creating some of the issues lost his election. So, in January 1st, 2010 is when I was able to take over the court completely.
And so, and when what we're talking about is we're talking about a criminal court, correct?
Yeah, municipal courts predominantly handle criminal cases. There's traffic infractions too, but most of our time is spent handling criminal cases. A student one time, I was with some high school students, and I told my story about going from this high level litigation
to criminal court,
to traffic and misdemeanors. And the student said, "Well, you don't handle very important cases, do you?" And I said, "Actually, I handle the most important. I can get somebody before they graduate to felonies. I run a repair shop, not a junkyard. I help people have better lives. That's what I'm able to do in this court."
And I really appreciate that. So you're coming in as a litigator. This is a demographic that you don't typically work with in your professional career, and as an sort of an outlier coming into what sounds like it may have been kind of a mess.
An immigrant. I was an immigrant into
Okay,
that.
there you go. Okay, I like that. And you're looking at things from, an outside perspective, and so what do you see?
Well, keep in mind that in my practice, I was working with some of the finest lawyers in the country.
Right.
Some of the most experienced lawyers. I myself was rated as AV, which by Martindale Hubbell is AV preeminent, is the highest you can go. So I come from that to lawyers that are brand new, inexperienced, overworked. And there's a lot of good lawyers, a lot of experienced lawyers too, but predominantly it's you go into this system that's overwhelmed, that's in some cases becomes checkbox justice in the sense that we're just trying to get rid of a case. There's people within that, always there's people that really care and want people to do well and everything else, but it basically is thousands of cases a year. The complexity is in the volume at that level of court, whereas the complexity in the type of litigation I did before was in the issues, and the complexity is in the volume in the what's called courts of limited jurisdiction, municipal courts and district courts. And so witnessing that and witnessing how we did things and everything I was able to kind of do the wait a minute. There might be better ways to do this.
How long did it take you being in that role before you said, okay, wait a minute, like we have a problem, like there's a problem with the way that we're handling things?
Well, it was an evolution, obviously, as you one of those things you keep learning and learning and learning from. Where it really started sticking is where I really started to do something about it was probably about 2017. So I'd been a judge for a number of years, and what I realized is that and therapeutic courts were becoming more vogue, and that type of thing. And so I actually created a forum. I did a forum in December of 2017 to bring people together to discuss these issues. And it focused on trying to remedy the fragmented, siloed approach that we have, not only in our courts, but in dealing with people that are cycling through our courts. The court system itself is fragmented. The response is fragmented. People are kind of pushed back and forth among programs and systems, and there's not enough kind of participant-based focus. And so basically my initial foray into this was to try to get people to understand that we're all seeing the same people. That it's hospitals, police, courts, jails. We're seeing some of the same people. So why don't we work together to figure out how we solve their problems and how we actually make a difference for them, rather than living in our own little world. And as people pass through, we check the box that, well, they came through and we close that case. Why not make it more deliberate? And so that's where it started. And then ultimately I learned from a state legislator named Representative Roger Goodman about the sequential intercept model and how that was really kind of the approach that needed to occur to make it more organized. So right now, what I noticed is we are very program and system based, and we needed to be more participant based. And I use the jigsaw puzzle as an example. So if you can imagine a jigsaw puzzle, and each of us in the system, whether it's police, courts, jails, treatment agencies, whatever, we represent a piece of the puzzle, and we know exactly what our piece is, where we fit, right? And we think we're the answer. If you just give us money, or if you just do this, we can fix it, right? But the people we serve, all they see is a bunch of jigsaw puzzle pieces strewn about, and we don't even give them the box, right? And so they're lost. And some people are living in the woods and stuff. They give up. It's too complex. And to get bounced back and forth among courts without really, and with different agencies and everything else, it becomes very frustrating for people. So trying to pull that together to be more deliberate, where we're not system based or program based, but participant based, where that person becomes the jigsaw puzzle, and the pieces that are missing we try to fill, and then that's really the it's kind of the second phase of what I've tried to do, which is to basically be a lot more deliberate about what we do instead of this hodgepodge of fragmented approaches.
Well, and do you have an example? Do you have a story that you can share of how you started to implement what you saw as a potential solution to your average person that is running through your court over and over
Well,
again?
it's amazing how some conversations, I can remember individual conversations that led me down a particular path. Representative Lauren Davis and I were speaking in November 2019 down in the Capitol building in a conference room, and we were talking about these issues. And she's very much a proponent of peer navigators. And we came up with, just sitting there, this concept of the warm handoff from the courts using peer navigators. Okay, so what I did, we ultimately, I wrote a paper in November 2019 called Justice Involved Therapeutic Intervention, advocating for state money, because the local courts are expected to take care of themselves financially, the cities and the counties. And on the basis that this is a regional issue, not a local issue, and was successful in getting money. And so far, it's been about $30 million from the state that's been allocated to the local courts. And what I did with our money is create barrier-free access to peer navigators. So if somebody comes into my court, and even to pay a traffic ticket, they have access to a peer. And the other thing, and that forum I talked about in December 2017, there's a guy named Lalu. Shaitesh Sharma was his name. And if you go on YouTube and look at Know Me Before You, and you search for Know Me Before You Judge Me, you'll see his story. And he was in the system for 13 years. And the question I asked, because I took his what he said in the forum, and I put some captions with it. The question I asked, what would his life have been had there been meaningful intervention the very first time he came into court, instead of waiting 13 years? Yeah. And I say meaningful intervention, where it's really trying to get a person to where they feel comfortable and they can trust that they can talk about whatever issues they're having, because they're not going to confess to me as a judge.
Right.
Our contract with our peer navigators prohibits them from telling the judge what the defendants tell them, because you want to have that environment. And when I spoke at the drug court conference in October of 2022, I think it was, I started my presentation on these issues and said, are you willing to live with the success you'll never know about? Because I'll never know whether somebody turned their life around with that kind of method, where in the system itself, the legal system, we tend to want to control. We tend to want to have, make sure that people meet benchmarks. And if you don't, we're going to punish you, and where there's going to be consequences, versus as long as somebody isn't committing crimes, let them solve their issues the way anybody else would. So if somebody wants some kind of intervention and they have access to it and they can get it, let them do it. And if you're not committing a crime, I don't need to punish you because you missed an appointment. Or, see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Versus the court really trying to micromanage that too much in some cases.
Yeah.
Focus on what our job is, and that's to prevent crime.
Yeah.
And let the professionals handle the behavioral health issues that a lot of people have that never commit crimes.
You consider peers professionals?
Yes, I do.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to tell you why. In the industry, I was a peer at one point, and I was the bottom rung of the ladder. And so thank you for validating a very, very important profession.
Well, it's a thing. It's about trust, and today I was telling the story. You ever heard the starfish story?
Hmm.
Okay, well,
I
this
think you
is
should tell it for our viewers
oh,
who
okay.
haven't heard it.
There's this little boy, a little kid walking on the beach, and he's taking starfish, and he's throwing them in the water. And this old man comes up to him and says, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, the sun's coming out, and if I don't get these starfish into the water, they're going to die. The sun will dry them out." And the old man looks around and sees thousands of starfish on the beach, and he said, "There must be thousands of them. How could you ever make a difference?" And the boy says, "It'll make a difference to this one, right?" And that's what it's about. It's making a difference to people one person at a time, because most of what I do as a judge is coach.
Yeah.
And most of what I do is try to get people to believe in themselves, because there's so many people that want to beat them down and tell them they aren't capable. But getting people to understand that they're just as capable of anybody else to accomplish miracles. Yeah. And that to take that approach for, my own life, when I left my faith years ago, was because it was when I grew up, it was about avoiding punishment. I went back to church after my sons were needing to go to different things, different rituals that are part of the church. The priest that was there basically has an ethic of demonstrating to us about seeking the rewards of faith. The reason that's important from what I do is I'd rather get people to focus on the rewards of doing what's right than being afraid of me because of what they might do wrong.
Yeah.
And people are what I have occasionally, not always, because some people don't like me, some defendants, but it goes with the territory. But
my kids don't like me.
There you go. There you go.
That's okay.
So it's like they don't want to disappoint me.
Yeah.
Right. So the way we do things, like right now in the system itself, and the judges that are very much want to feel the same way I do, but we're focusing so much on therapeutic courts and only therapeutic courts. But therapeutic courts by statute exclude people. Yeah. Right? You can't, certain crimes don't qualify. If you're not bad enough off, you don't qualify. Right. Et cetera, et cetera. So what do we do with all the people that are waiting? What do we do with all the people that don't qualify? And that's where I'm at with this idea that you make things available to people early. Yeah. And organize them in a way like we could save so much money too. The way
intentional interventions.
Exactly. And the sequential intercept model, if you there's 6 intercepts. Intercept 0 is the community, so it'd be like family or whatever referring people. Intercept 1 is law enforcement. Intercept 2 is your initial appearance in court. Intercept 3 is therapeutic courts. Intercept 4 is jail reentry. Intercept 5 is probation. So if you can imagine those, seeing that as a continuum as people progress through, that those systems work together in a way that becomes participant focused. And because we aren't participant focused, things slip through the cracks and people get punished for it. Like an example I used the other day was somebody that I might release to go to inpatient treatment because they needed it. So I released them from jail to do that. Well, they had a court date in another court they didn't show up for. The court didn't know they were an inpatient, right? Because we don't track that. Right. All of a sudden, they issue a warrant for their arrest. And so the person's out of inpatient, they get stabilized, and all of a sudden they're back in jail because they didn't. Where if we work together and we're participant focused, we'd be able to have it be. We develop systems where we'd know if somebody was in a position where they can't help being in court. Now that's just one example. Yeah. There's plenty of other examples to that too.
Well, yeah, no, for sure. I mean, even in social services, one of the things is there was a lot of service being replicated. And so I think that's kind of a similar thing.
The way it works now is I've had people in my community court in Pierce County's drug court and involved with lead in Seattle, and so basically we've taken up 3 spots. Yeah. With therapeutic intervention, and we could have freed up 2 more spots for other people.
For sure, because that's extra resources that are being spent on somebody when you could have solved it all in one court.
Right, and even if it's in multiple courts, the idea that that we would all know that they're doing X, right?
So there doesn't need to be extra requirements
Right.
for an individual to the other.
Yeah, and right now, under the way it works is, I'll just pick on my own city. If the Federal Way Police wanted to develop a LEAD program, law enforcement assisted diversion, they could go out and do that. Wouldn't have to coordinate with me at all. They'd have their own treatment agencies, their caseworkers, everything. Then I'd create my community court, do the same thing.
Yeah.
Don't have to coordinate with anybody. Then our jails that we use could do the same thing.
So you're replicating services.
So we could have the same person going through all three systems and being told to do three different things. And then now again, that's 3 times as many people that can be, 3 people that can be served instead of 1.
Yeah.
If we did it towards a continuum. And that's where I came up with the concept of what's called regional resource networks. And that was funded in the 2023 session, I believe. Yeah, 2023 session, experimenting with that.
Okay. And you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, basically, right now, if I want to start a therapeutic court or if police want to start LEAD, you have to go do it on your own. You have to find all the resources, get people coordinated, do all that stuff. What a regional resource network could do, and in South King County, there's 9 municipal courts. There's a number of courts, but we could all, and then number of cities, where basically it's a common network of resources, so that if I have a peer in my court, they would be able to refer people to the same set of resources that Kent would or Auburn would or whatever, so that ultimately that person, it would be participant based in the sense that when that person's in their system, they know where they're at and they don't make them go somewhere else. And it makes it easier for us to have therapeutic intervention because there's a lot of courts and a lot of police departments, a lot of jails that don't do anything because it's too expensive, it's too difficult. You also got to manage it and everything else, so it's better to do nothing versus under the regional resource network model, they just say, hey, we want to be involved in this too. Can we refer people?
Yeah.
And they don't have to do anything other than refer people.
And so that was going to be one of my next questions. You mentioned it's too expensive. So let's talk about sort of the variation of your highest level of need individual that's going through your court system in comparison to the person at their first level of intervention. So what is the cost variation there per individual?
I couldn't tell you total what the cost would be, but from if somebody's the very first time they're in court, they're there for some charge that might be associated with some kind of behavioral health issue, right? Theft, trespass, whatever the case may be. They might still be housed, they might still be employed, they might still, so there's all kinds of things. What you're doing is you're now focusing on relatively minimal areas of need, right? And so I'm a proponent of that early intervention. But then if somebody's truly influenced by behavioral health and that's why they're committing crime, if you intervene and you can help them, you likely won't see them back, right? And if they get some kind of meaningful intervention, not just go over there and talk to somebody and then we'll forget about you. That's not meaningful, right? But there's always going to be people that come back if it didn't stick. On the second time, now we're a little bit more, wait a minute, we're going to be a little more intentional. We're, blah, blah, blah. So in the third time, you ramp it up even more. By the fourth time, you're going, wait a minute. There's something here that we're now, in other words, you're now allocating resources based on the ultimate response. Because you're going to deal with a lot of people are never going to come back with relatively minimal intervention versus if we, like right now, a tragedy is that we wait too long and now it's just they're unemployable.
Committing real crimes.
And now all of a sudden it's I'll give you an example of traditional system when somebody commits a theft. It's typically in most courts, it's what's called a stipulated order of continuance, where somebody gets an agreement with the prosecutor. They do certain things, the case will be dismissed. One of the things is to go to a class about why theft is bad, called consumer awareness class. Now, that's okay, that's fine. That would work with somebody that stole because they wanted to steal, right? So somebody that's really in the throes of behavioral health issues, what ends up happening is why theft is bad doesn't ring with them,
Right.
right?
Because it's a means to an end.
Right. And what it typically happens with people that are truly affected is they might not show up for probation.
Mm-hmm.
They might get a new crime because there's really been no meaningful intervention. So what ends up happening is they might get an arrest warrant for not showing up because they don't have a good address anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then so they're in custody and they lose that stipulated order of continuance. Now they have a conviction plus these other multiple convictions because you didn't because you focused on sending them to a class about why theft is bad instead of letting them
Sort of
have
addressing
some
the
kind
underlying cause.
yeah, instead of letting them have some kind of confidential means by which they could just say, hey, I'm having difficulty.
Yeah.
And one bit of legislation I wrote years ago would give a person the first time they commit a crime would give the person the absolute right to ask for diversion.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're successful, the case is dismissed. Second time, the judge had discretion whether to give it. But the idea is to provide an incentive for somebody, and to get it, you had to confess to having some kind of behavioral health issue. It's an incentive for that person to seek early intervention because the X factor in all this, because I can do all kinds of things as a judge, I can use all kinds of techniques. Excuse me. But the X factor is that person's desire to change themselves. What's motivating that person to get them so that I can help them identify the motivation that's going to get them to choose different. And the behavioral health issues are sometimes so bad that people aren't able to even, kind of discern those kind of things. But that's because we wait too long in a lot of ways. And we've always had crime. We've always had criminals. At some point, somebody's just going to be a criminal that also has a behavioral health issue, right? But because we wait so long, we can't tell the difference.
Right.
And we treat everybody the same, and then the public gets frustrated because they see this cycle of crime all the time versus having an actual strategy that gives people opportunities. If it's truly, a behavioral health issue, give you an opportunity to take care of it while you still can, because likely if they do, they're not going to have a conviction.
Right.
They're going to be able to go get work. They're going to be able to have a productive life.
So you're trying to focus on prevention.
Exactly. And also, Lalu's story, he talks about how until he worked on his underlying mental health issues, no matter what happened, what he could do. I remember what he did. He'd always go back, and ultimately, and I'll spoil it a little bit. Ultimately, he died of an overdose. Mm. But that's the sad part of his story.
Yeah.
But in that, and the reason I call it "Know Me Before You Judge Me" is because people have a tendency to kind of label people that are going through those issues and kind of treat them like lepers.
Yeah.
And there's reasons why. And for Lalu's story, he was sexually molested, he was raped, shot at, stabbed, all kinds of things as he grew up. And this is before he became an adult.
Yeah.
And so he turned to alcohol and drugs, and that's how he dealt with it. Yeah. And 13 years in the system before somebody like myself and my benchmate kind of intervened with him and come to understand how he could do things different. And, I never know why he overdosed, but that video is very powerful.
How long ago did he overdose?
Been 2000, I can't remember, it was 2020, or maybe it was before that. But he was, it's a sad case.
Yeah.
But again, the reason I did the video is to inspire other people to look at what if we intervened early.
Yeah.
And made it, because right now, the way it works with probate, until we started doing therapeutic courts, and the traditional system is somebody gets on probation, we go do this, 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 and this. If you don't do it, you're in trouble.
Right.
You kick them to the curb, kick them out, say,
Figure it
okay, go
out.
figure it out. If
Figure
you
it
don't
out.
figure it out, you're going to jail.
Right.
Right.
And we're talking about people who don't know how to figure out most normal things.
Yeah, they're
right
in front of.
I was one, so yeah.
So that,
And I avoided that probation office for a long time.
right. And what Lalu talked about is like sending somebody to jail. You're in a 4-person cell with 5 people, and your bed's right next to the toilet, and all you can do is talk about where the best places to steal from, where you can get drugs, and everything else. So jail wasn't doing anything for him. Other people, the first time they go to jail, it's like, wow, that's forever changed. And other people, it doesn't work, especially under the throes of really addictive drugs. That's the driver, and that's what. But he would talk about, when if he could come in and feel real motivated. But as soon as he leaves court, the treatment agency could be across the street, but if the drug house is 5 miles away, it looked closer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the type of thing he talked about. And so it's very, well, listening to a story, it kind of brings it home that everybody's story as an individual is a fingerprint. Your story is as individual as a fingerprint. There's nobody has a story like you.
Yeah.
It's similar, but not exactly like yours. And so understanding opportunity and giving people opportunity is important. And one of the reasons I'm running for Supreme Court is because our Supreme Court's been silent.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, when they made the Blake decision, when they declared the drug laws unconstitutional, and that law had been upheld twice before, they did it with arguments that the lawyers didn't even come up with. And that threw us on our head, because here we are trying to keep people off drugs, and they basically legalized it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the reasons I'm running, is because there has to be.
Well, we're not being rational right now.
Yeah. And basically the idea that people want to be compassionate, they want to understand and everything. But what I've learned is people that are going through this, some of them it doesn't apply to, but they don't want to be where they are.
They don't.
And
they don't like the circumstances of their life. And at this point, nobody's coming.
Right.
As we eliminate laws and ordinances that prohibit a person from being able to be separated by law enforcement and courts, because that was going to be one of my questions for you, is what about the individual who can't stop?
Well, I've actually written legislation called therapeutic detention facilities,
Yeah.
creating those.
Mm-hmm.
In Rhode Island, they have.
Yes.
And basically, what ends up being a financial deterrent is that there's no way to pay for treatment. Mm-hmm. Medicaid used to be when somebody went to jail, Medicaid was terminated. Then it became where it was suspended. Now somebody has to be in jail more than 30 days for it to be suspended.
Okay.
But basically,
we had a DOTSA back in the day. Probably not since you've been on the bench. I feel like that changed.
Could be.
But a DOTSA was a surefire way to get into treatment through the state, but that all changed.
But was somebody in custody during that?
They could be released from custody to an DOTSA treatment.
So this is where, say this person, now you've given them 4 or 5 opportunities and they're continuing.
Yeah.
And say there's some people we let go to inpatient treatment and they leave.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's no way to force them to stay there. So this therapeutic detention facility would be you are sentenced to that. Mm-hmm. You are not leaving. You can't leave. It'd be more like a memory facility, a hospital you can't leave than a jail.
They have a treatment program inside of RJC. So, but it's directly associated with the King County Drug Court. I'm not sure if it's still functioning, but one of the best things that you could do in a jail.
Yeah, and the thing is that what ends up happening is if it's jurisdiction by jurisdiction and you're not allowed to, you don't have the funds to be able to pay for it. Mm-hmm. The idea is to provide a Medicaid waiver, where Medicaid would pay for the treatment.
Yeah.
And then the jurisdiction would pay for the physical plant and the facility and the staff.
Yeah.
But it would be reserved for people where no other intervention worked.
Yeah.
And Ricky's Law, which my friend Lauren Davis actually cut through, which is civil commitment for if somebody's addicted. The person has to be to danger of themselves or others before that can occur. With a criminal case, it would just have to be demonstrated that no other interventions worked.
Yeah.
This is the only intervention under my plan. And again, we're dealing with human nature, and we're dealing with individuals. I'll tell you a story if it's okay.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Both these cases involved alcohol rather than drugs, but they make the point. I had one guy with over 200 crimes.
Yeah.
No matter what I did, I could put him in jail for a long time. I could give him treatment. I could do all kinds of stuff. Didn't stop. Crime after crime after crime. I had this woman in court. She's an alcoholic, her third or fourth DUI, and she was going to jail for a long time. And she was up. This is back when we were signing orders because we weren't electronic. And she was just bawling. And I said something to her. Okay. Well, about 2 or 3 years later, I'm flipping pancakes for Kiwanis, and this woman comes up and says, "Are you Judge Larson?" And I said, "Is it good that I'm Judge Larson?" And she said, "Well, yeah." And she said, "Thanks for changing my life." You know what I said to her? Oh, it was very short and sweet. "You'll get through this." She hung on to that and changed her entire freaking life.
Yeah.
Because a judge said, "You'll get through this." Somebody said that to her. So we have those two extremes. No matter what you do, nothing's going to change this person. And this person, all they had, and they were both in the throes of alcoholism, right?
Yeah.
And, but it's so individual based.
Yeah. And I think the key that you said that I don't hear people say, but it's a question that I've asked when I worked in social services and now as I interview people all over the place, is, do you like the condition of your life? Do you like your circumstances? Because for me, as a person with lived experience who has come through the federal way court system, and I pondered, was he the judge? I didn't know how to remove myself. I learned to live in patterns that were shown to me. And then, I had the behavioral health issues. I'm an addict, and I didn't know how to pull myself out of it. But I often think, so I really appreciate your focus and your perspective. I often say and believe that had my interventions been intentional much earlier on, that my life would have been very different. But I understand today I needed to be where I'm at for
Right.
what I'm trying to accomplish. However, the whole focus of everything I do is to try to intentionally change our system so that it is more intentional
Right.
for those that are going through it. So I really value
So
where
one
you're
thing
coming from.
that you do that it falls into one of my corny sayings, because I have a lot of corny sayings.
So do I. I have lots of them.
So one of my corny sayings is always better to inspire than it is to require. Okay?
Yeah.
Because people change with inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
They may change temporarily. They may get through the moment if they're fearful of not doing something. But their life changes for the better if they're inspired to be better.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why my little motto of it's always better to inspire than it is to require.
Yeah.
More people have been helped by being inspired for change than by being threatened.
Yeah.
And
I
and a
come
lot
from
of people,
a little bit of both, but yeah.
well, again, it's an individual thing. Like,
Yeah.
for instance, I'll get to a point with some people where we've tried different things, and it's not always, it might be domestic violence cases, et cetera, but where they're out of compliance with probation, and the prosecutor wants to put them in jail, and the defense says, no, don't put them in jail. And we've given them 2 or 3 opportunities to be in compliance. So, okay, so I'll say the prosecutor's asking for 60 days of jail. I'll impose the 60 days, but then I'll stay it. And I'll say to that person, who do you want to control your life, you or me? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you want to control your own life, you do the stuff you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And if you want me to control it, you won't.
Yeah.
And I said, right now, you're choosing whether you're going to jail or not. Because if you're in compliance, when you come back to court 2 months from now, month from now, whatever, your lawyer can argue to convert this to a jail alternative or to reduce it or whatever.
Yeah.
So you're the one putting yourself in jail.
Yeah. That's what I teach my guys in prison.
Yeah.
It's all about the choices. Everything happening in our lives right now is based on a decision that I've made.
Well, the other thing I tell people, they when I'm sentencing them, they do the allocution. They say, Your Honor, I want to be accountable. And it'll say, I'll tell you a secret. It's not that much of a secret. I said, if you're accountable before you do things, you don't have to worry about it afterward.
That's right.
Right? And so and some people think, well, yeah, these people are just too far gone and everything else. And there may be people that it won't make a difference. They'll laugh at you. They'll think you're a joke for saying it. but it's the starfish.
Yeah.
It's the
It's meaningful
starfishes.
for this one.
It's the people that can make a difference to that you do it for,
Yeah.
right? And I got prosecutors some, well, Your Honor, we wanted to do this and you didn't do it, and now they've made it worse or whatever. And I'm thinking, well, they made it worse.
Yeah.
They're
And
the
there's
ones
a
that did it.
response for that, right?
Right. And the thing is that somehow there's no magic pill, there's no magic wand, there's nothing that other than just, again, getting people to the opportunity and then having them take advantage of it. And a lot of times I know there's frustration in law enforcement where they'll go out with social workers and they'll offer people assistance and people turn it down.
Yeah.
And
In the throes of addiction, in the heat of the moment, though, you're not likely to get somebody to
there's
bite.
there's also who knows what's going through their minds, but ultimately in the court system, if we make it about carrot and stick,
Mhm.
which to a degree we have to do, but if just like in our community court, people are choosing not to come to community court because it's easier to just take the deal where they just don't have to do anything.
Mhm.
4 days with 4 days credit for time served, 4 days of jail, 4 days credit, and be done.
Yeah.
Versus actually doing something to intervene.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the punishments for not doing things, well, why would I take a risk that I'm going to be punished for not doing things when I can just be done with it?
Yeah.
So that's why in therapeutic courts it needs to be
Incentivized.
but incentivized by that person understanding where they're going to have a better life by doing things differently. And the other thing too is I tell this story about this woman. She's living in the woods, and somebody gave her a motorhome to live in, and she had it 3 days, and somebody torched it. So she was back in court and commiserating, and really, I mean, traumatic. Where all of a sudden you have this place to live and now you don't. And people were going around the room because in community court we're all sitting at the same table and having a discussion. And it got to me. I was last. And my question was, did you use?
Yeah.
And she said, no. And I said, you realize how much progress you've made?
Yeah.
You've lived through one of the
that's
most
a huge
stressful.
Win.
For her, she didn't even think of it that way. And for her, it was like, boom, she took off because she knew she was capable.
Yeah.
She knew she was capable of weathering storms and not resorting to what she had done before to deal with pain or trauma or whatever else she was dealing with.
Yeah.
And I just saw her about a month ago, and she was at our resource center for her son, and she's happy and healthy and everything else.
I love that.
And because she believed in herself.
Yeah. Well, I really value the work that you're doing. And so, and I know you talked a little bit about running. Why are you running for Supreme Court of Washington State?
Well, there's multiple reasons, and part of it has to do with these administration of justice issues. The other part has to do with the fact that I very much want us to get back to being pure judges, and where the courts themselves have been hijacked by politics.
Yeah.
And trust and confidence isn't necessarily high for courts. In our state, in the state Supreme Court, conservatives don't trust our state Supreme Court. At the federal level, the liberals don't trust the U.S. Supreme Court. And trust and confidence is very important. And somebody asked me earlier today about in our state Supreme Court how some of the decisions are fractured, and it's because people want particular outcomes. And the law should dictate the outcome. The outcome shouldn't dictate the law.
Yeah.
And if you want a particular outcome because of whatever belief system you're operating from as a judge, that's when you end up skewing justice and end up creating confidence issues. Whereas if you apply the law and the Constitution the way it's written and do it in a way that that people understand why you've done it that way from a legal standpoint, that's where you build trust and confidence in the judiciary. Somebody asked me, again, I've been in multiple places today. I said, are you a conservative? And I said, I'm a judge. And I said, you can label me as a conservative, but the first time, if being a conservative judge means that I'm going to apply the law and the Constitution the way it's written, then okay. But what about in Washington State where the Democrat legislature passes law you don't agree with? and the law is clear and it's being challenged and I uphold it, are you going to still think I'm a conservative?
Mm-hmm.
Because I did exactly what I promised to do, which is to uphold the law and the Constitution the way it's written, even if you don't agree with it politically,
Yeah.
even if I don't agree with it politically, because that's not my job as a judge, as a justice.
Politics don't belong in the courtroom.
Well, it's an insult to the political process to have judges decide outcomes. An example I use with people that are pro-choice is the Dobbs case last year or a couple of years ago in the U.S. Supreme Court. It's an example of why you don't want courts deciding those issues, because it only takes 5 justices to make the law the way they want it, right? Whereas if it's in the legislative process, it takes, in Washington State, it's I don't know how many, 49 and 98, whatever that number is, 147, a majority of 147 people to do it.
Okay.
To make a law. In Washington on abortion, we legalized it in 1970, 4 years before Roe versus Wade.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's a hot topic issue.
Mm-hmm. And
by talking about it, I'm not pro or con on the particular issue. I'm just bringing it up as an example of from a standpoint of somebody that feels strongly either way.
Yeah.
For somebody that's against it, the idea that the judges did it in 1974,
Mm-hmm.
did what they did, and the fact that they could do it now when they only need 5 of 9
Mm-hmm.
to do it, versus a whole legislature, or in our case in Washington, a vote of the people.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm getting at is that the political process itself has to be able to work.
Yeah.
Because it's a horrible place to make public policy, because only the litigants get a say, and the outcomes are very winner and loser and dictatorial. Somebody wins and somebody loses. Whereas in the political process, you reach consensus. You reach an outcome that where somebody feels there's not a necessarily winner or loser if you do it the right way. If you do it the right way, we end up with laws that we all need, not laws only some of us want.
Yeah.
And so I guess
laws that are representative of the people.
Yes, and the courts, by delving into politics and delving into public policy, skew that whole process and make it. So in Washington State, we decided same-sex marriage by referendum. When's the last time you saw a protest about same-sex marriage? When's the last time you saw somebody deny somebody a marriage license because they were same sex?
Yeah.
Because it was adopted, but in the political process,
Yeah.
where if it had been decided by a court, where it's a winner and a loser, we still have people upset one way or
That's
the
a
other.
really great example to use, actually, because it's true. There's been really no pushback.
Yeah, in fact, it's well accepted and everything else
Yeah.
because we did it in the political process. We didn't do it in the courts.
Yeah.
And if we had done it in the courts, there'd still be argument about it. There'd still be people that would not accept it. There'd still be people that would be fighting about it. And we'd want to get justices on the court so they can turn that case around so that it's the other way, instead of having the political process work the way it's supposed to.
You definitely are a mechanic in law. So what is your plan? If you were elected to the Washington State Supreme Court, what are you bringing to the table?
Well, I think decades, near just under 40 years of legal experience, but if you count my law school experience, 44 years of legal experience, 43. I think I bring somebody that's going to be measured in what I do. I'm going to want us to be dispassionate about the law. I'm going to want us to have people feel confident in our decisions, get rid of the agendas in the decisions, focus on the law and the Constitution the way it's written, have the law dictate the outcome and not the outcome dictate the law. Capital gains tax is that decision where they said it was an excise tax. A lot of people think that's politically motivated. Whether it is or not is not the issue. The question is because it was driven what appears to be by an agenda, there's not as much confidence in the decision holder. There's people on the other side that feel it was the best decision ever made because they agree with having a capital gains tax in Washington. So I'm not sure how good example that is, but it's a recent example where people thought that politics played a role in the outcome of a case. But then also, obviously, right now there's no leadership on our Supreme Court when it comes to behavioral health. We have a Minority and Justice Commission. We have a Gender and Justice Commission. We're going to now have, I can't remember the newest commission they came up with. It is that, I can't remember which one it is, but they just came out last week. But we don't have a Behavioral Health and Justice Commission. It's just not on the radar. It's just not something that's a priority, but it's killing our communities.
It's
and it's killing
predominantly
people.
taking over our country.
Right. And, but the court needs to take a leadership role in that with the legislature and everything else, because the courts, like it or not, the courts are where we have to address a lot of this stuff. So I in my presentations, I have two circles, right? I have a circle that's called individual impacts and a circle that's called community impacts, and they overlap, right? So the individual impacts would be somebody that has some kind of behavioral health issue and they're dealing with it, they're doing whatever they can, but they're not committing crime, right? Then you have community impacts, theft, trespass, et cetera, et cetera. And where those merge, I point out that that's opportunity.
Yeah, it is.
And because we don't have the leadership we need on the Supreme Court, we're squandering those opportunities because it's too fragmented. There's no real strategy. You can talk to judges and they're very fired up about therapeutic courts, and rightfully so, because therapeutic courts are important. But it's kind of the one-trick pony.
Right.
Because again, when I presented at the Drug Court Conference 2022, I showed a gate and a bunch of people outside the gate, and therapeutic courts are on one side and everybody else is on the other. So what do you do about the people that are outside the gate?
Because there are a lot of people that don't fit into the
right, and then it's absolutely insane
to
then say we're going to ignore you until you qualify to get into the gate.
Right, and some are overqualified and they'll never be able to fit into the gate. That was my case for a long time. There had to be a lot of strings pulled in order for me to get into a drug court program because I'd never had the right.
It's about therapeutic courts again are essential. They're absolutely essential.
I agree with you 100%.
But they're highly exclusionary.
No, absolutely they are. I didn't have the right charges, but I had gotten an opportunity to have private counsel who was connected, and so there were some things that were able to be done to help me get in. And had I not have had the support of a specific nonprofit that hired this specific not public defender, but attorney, I would never have gotten that opportunity. And I agree with you. And so let me ask you this question. What is your perspective? Because I agree with you 100% on all of the things that you're talking about. One of the things that I'm trying to do with what I'm accomplishing inside of the prison system is to show data on how we can have more effective incarceration tools, right? Because incarceration is a tool. And so for that demographic that does not fit into any of those off-ramps,
right,
the environment has to look the same inside of our carceral facilities. It has to, in my opinion, based on the many, many people that I know just like myself, it has to look the same in our social service structures. We have to be equipped to help people address those underlying causes.
Well,
what is your perspective on that?
Hopefully this is answering your question, but I wrote an op-ed with 9 other judges in the Seattle Times 2 years ago on competency restoration. And competency restoration where somebody is deemed to not understand the charges or able to assist their lawyer, that you can't proceed with charges, but you can get them restored through medication or otherwise so they can be prosecuted. And that's been a problem in Washington. The reason I brought that up is because we have the same people, yet we have a system that deals with restoration. We have civil commitments. We have all these different systems.
Siloed systems.
That are siloed from each other, that are dealing in a lot of cases with the same people, yet they don't work together.
Right.
And so
there is no cohesion. And you find that in so many different areas.
Right. And
No
so,
overlap, no
right.
communication.
And that's where the participant-based approach comes in.
Yeah.
Is where we're looking at that participant, that person, and what they've, like right now, if somebody wants to go to inpatient treatment, I can't tell how many times they've gone
Right.
unless they admit to it, or unless some lawyer manually looks through dockets,
Right.
or whatever, and I have no way of knowing. And so I guess what I'm getting at is that we need to integrate a lot better. And your original question, though, I apologize. Your original question.
Yeah, I mean, just what is your perspective on redeveloping the tool of incarceration? Because incarceration is a tool, so that it mirrors
Yeah, so there
a
should
therapeutic,
everything
really the approach that you're
everything
talking
should be a continuum.
Yes. That if you come into the courtroom and I am being I don't know, you know, I'm the defendant.
Right.
And I say, "No, I'm not interested in that." That's okay. Then you're going here, but guess what? It's all the same. Like it's all the same. It's all the same intervention. It's all the same addressing of the underlying causes. It's all the same kind of services that you're going to be getting inside of the institution as well, which I'm working on some stuff with that. But what's your perspective on that? Redeveloping
Well,
that
again,
tool.
if you the question presupposes that it's a separate system, and it is currently. But again, if you see it from a participant-based approach and you see it as a continuum,
Yes.
then seamless.
Yes.
So if somebody's at a particular stage of their treatment, a particular stage in their recovery or whatever, and they end up in a prison, they should be able to pick up where they left off.
Yeah.
And there might be reasons why they're in prison. It might, they committed a new crime or they did something different. Maybe that you need to wait a minute and look closer. But that's the way it needs to be approached, is as a continuum. So when they get released, that continuum continues.
Right.
If it's working, if it's not working, and we should be
then
able
you
to tell.
tweak it. You adjust. You make adjustments.
If you should be able to tell if it's participant based, because if it's not working and you're focused on the participant, but if ex-prison, or I'll use an example of the jails. Somebody can go to King County Jail and they do a workup on them and everything else and figure out what other the issues are, and they're starting from scratch because they got no, unless they were in there before or whatever. And say that person gets released from King County, goes to SCORE.
Right.
SCORE is going to start over again.
Right.
There's no continuum. There's no handoff, in other words. And so the long answer to your short question is basically it has to be seen as a continuum and it has to be seen as participant based. So no matter which environment they're in, that continuum of progress gets made, and expecting things of people is not a sin. And that's where sometimes things become counterproductive, is when there's people that think it's not compassionate to expect improvement, to expect a different approach. It's absolutely compassionate to expect people, because that's where you get your esteem.
It's not compassionate to do nothing.
Yes, and rest in place and rest in peace have the same initials.
Yeah.
And because that's a way to really kill a person's spirit.
Yeah.
Is to let them just stay where they are.
Is to leave the Ginny out in the gutter.
Because you're incapable. I know more than you do, and I'm a compassionate person, so I'm not gonna expect that you're gonna do any better because you can't help yourself.
Because you can't, right? I think that word needs to be taken out of the English.
Yeah, my dad used to say, "Can't never did anything."
It's like, I used to get very frustrated. I worked in behavioral health and as a peer, and I would become very frustrated when people who felt like they were in a higher seat than I would tell me that the clients that I worked with were not capable.
And that's where the starfish story comes back, because the worst thing we can do is reduce people to generalizations.
That's right.
Because then you've stripped them of their humanity. You've stripped them, and all of a sudden, isn't any wonder that they don't see hope when nobody else does.
Any face they look into is hopeless for them. And so, and I use an analogy a lot. It's, there were a lot of people, and this was one of the reasons I broke off, went back to school, and did the things that I'm doing now, is because I was working in social services for a long time, and it felt like at first I didn't have autonomy to help somebody get to where I was. I was limited at the kind of support that I was able to give through my contractual agreement. But it was like a rat in a maze, and just as they were getting ready to exit, the door would be dropped down and they would be rewarded for failing. And I felt like I was not serving people at my highest capacity.
And that's a symptom of being program based.
Absolutely.
Instead of
Absolutely it is.
participant based, because program based is concerned about complying with the program, and
Yeah.
participant based is about
Inputs.
actually seeing
They're concerned with
people
inputs,
improve.
not outcomes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And data. It's like fingernails on a chalkboard because people aren't data. People
No.
aren't data.
Well, and let me just say, okay, I worked in nonprofits for a period of time, and that data is so manipulated. And as I listen to people talk about data a lot of the times now, it's so ambiguous, but they sound like they know what they're talking about a lot of the time.
Well, somebody asked
the data are the human lives.
So I was at a thing earlier today, and somebody asked this question that inspired me to give this answer, which is basically the issues we're talking about are symptoms.
Yeah.
There's a much deeper issue, cultural issue, and otherwise in our culture as a whole that we need to start addressing, in the sense that you wonder why whether it's trauma, whatever the case may be, and it's an individual as a fingerprint. The Lalu story. Why? That you could ask, what if somebody would have had, what would his life have been had somebody not had, would have intervened initially, right?
Okay.
What his life would have been like if he wasn't sexually molested and wasn't raped and wasn't stabbed, right? The things we do to each other in the name of whatever are destroying us. We're destroying ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's been around forever. Human nature is what it is. But the question is, culturally, we have to always look to aspire to the best in human nature rather than aspire to what might not be the best for each other.
Yeah.
And so I've actually done a course, I've created a presentation called How Freedom Works, where I talk about human nature and social order, free will, those kind of things, and that it's okay to talk about values. That doesn't have to be persnickety. It can, or hoity-toity.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the things that give us the bond. And there's two rules that the presentation is based on. Two rules. Rule 1: love the freedom of others as much or more as you love your own. Mm-hmm. And rule 2: it's more important to do right than it is to be right.
That's right.
And the reason I came up with the rules is right now is we're the opposite. My rights are more important than yours.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be right even if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And that fuels this atmosphere where we're not happy, and I don't know, it's just so complex, but it basically, we have never been in a position in history where we're more capable of achieving self-actualization on a macro scale, at least in the United States.
Do you feel like we're moving?
Yeah,
we
degrade. Yeah, and I think so. And it's
at a
again,
rapid rate, it seems like.
Yeah, and well, we're in this mode of I'm entitled to my opinion, you're entitled to my opinion too, and we're in this mode of all about power, all about me. When in reality, those two rules. If I love your freedom as much as I love my own, I'm not going to do anything to harm you.
Because I'm thinking
I'm not going to steal from you. I'm not going to
valuing you.
I'm not going to commit crimes against you. If I'm more interested in doing right than being right, then, I won't be as concerned. I won't try to justify things that harm other people, because I'm better or I'm more entitled or I'm whatever. So it's fantasy island in a lot of ways, because as long as there's been people on Earth, there's been conflict, but it's just the extent to which we can be free depends on our ability to govern ourselves and not harm other people. And we've culturally seemed like we're desensitized to how we affect other people in terms of, and when we pursue our brand of happiness, we sometimes lose sight of the fact that we're affecting other people adversely when we do it.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's just my little commentary for the day, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. So if people want to support your campaign, follow you, learn more about you, where do they go?
Well, the website is Larson for WA, and that's LarsonForWA.org. Facebook, if you just on Facebook, just search for Judge Dave Larson for Supreme Court. Twitter's Larson for WA, at Larson for WA, or X, whatever it's called now. And then I can't ask for money, but there's a donate button on the page if people are inspired.
Okay.
But I can't ask for money directly. I have to have a committee that does that.
Okay. Yeah. I'll be really honest with you. I vote for policy. I vote for rational approach. And I just want to thank you, regardless of what the letter behind your name is when you run, because you are proving to me that you're more focused on human life, the improvement of the quality of human life. Because I think about judges that I have faced in my life, which no negative judgment toward anybody, but to see a shift in really such a short period of time, and for you to really adopt that through your own humanity, to me is really powerful.
Well, it's the difference between the fact I value the responsibility that comes with the position, and I don't value the power.
Yeah.
Well, the power at arm's length.
Yeah.
And because the power is too tempting.
Yeah.
That's where you end up being in front of some judges who get what's called robitis, and where the power becomes consuming. And you have to hold that at arm's length, and you have to embrace the responsibility. And that's the trick.
Yeah.
To being able to have the attitudes and approach.
Well, it's not about you.
Work with people. Yeah. And again, there's some people that will benefit from a judge that yells at them.
Yeah.
And wants to do it or else. And in DV, domestic violence cases, I got a standing ovation one time when I was a bunch of treatment counselors where I said, domestic violence is about power and control. What do we use in the system? Power and control.
Oh, yeah.
Do it or else.
Look, I've had relationships with the criminal justice system that is absolutely a DV relationship. So we're all just human beings, right?
Right.
We're all just human beings, and we're all functioning from the same baseline of emotions and tactics and characteristics. And so, there's no big I, little you in this world, and you're ruling in that way in your position as a judge. And I just want to say thank you so much.
I appreciate it. And I know there's a number of, there's more, and like you said, more and more judges that feel the way I do.
Yeah.
I think what ultimately, what I want to see is right now we start with punitive and then we go to therapeutic.
Yeah.
I want to start with therapeutic and then go to punitive.
It makes the most sense.
And right now, the thing I'm fighting is this notion that therapeutic courts are the only answer, and they're not the only answer.
We have to have a variation of things.
Yeah.
It's no different than how I parent my kids.
Right.
And specifically, I have a bunch of gray hair from my youngest who just turned 18, and I'm going to tell you, she gets so frustrated sometimes because she thinks I'm being mean or I'm opposed to her or what have you. And it's like, no, but you've done this a million times. I've given you all these opportunities. So you're essentially making the decision for your outcomes because, and I try to look at it in the same way that I have a relationship with God, my higher power, which is, God gives me these guidelines and directions. And when I choose to not follow the instructions that are going to help bless my life,
right,
then I have to deal with the consequences of my choices when I went outside of those guidelines. And really, as I was listening to you today, that's the same way that you're ruling in a courtroom. And I think that it's most effective. It's really needed. So the shift and the transition, because we've spent decades getting all this information about what doesn't work. And I think that you're adopting on a route that is very effective. And so I just want to say thank you for your service.
Well, it's the way I describe it is balancing compassion with accountability.
Yeah.
Because without accountability, and the other thing I explained the other day that somebody asked me about, compassion with judges, and I said, well, to be an effective judge, your heart and your mind have to always be in balance, have to be in tone with each other. Too much head, too much intellect, too harsh, too doesn't work. Too much heart, too soft, doesn't work. It's got to be in harmony.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do, is keep that in harmony.
Yeah.
Some people want us to be tougher on crime. Some people want us to be softer on crime. I want us to be smarter on crime.
Yeah. I like that. Thank you so much for interviewing with me today.
I appreciate it. Thanks.